En este mismo lugar,
and it smells of sulfur still today.
This year, Chavez is playing host to none other than Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Well, here now with more on what is and is not being said at the UN General Assembly meeting, let's bring in Spencer Boyer. He's Director of International Law and Diplomacy with the Center for American Progress. Sir, good to see you.
Well, thank you for having me.
What did the President do right today?
Well, I thought it was interesting that the President focused most of his speech today on issues that haven't really been at the top of his agenda during his presidency. Poverty, development, human rights abuses in Myanmar, HIV/AIDS, and really didn't talk very much about the big elephants in the room, Iran and Iraq.
Why do you think that is?
Well, certainly there's speculation that President Bush is trying to show a softer side of his presidency, as it were, show that he cares about other things than the hard security issues he's been focused on in Iraq and Afghanistan, in North Korea. But also some believe that he might be signaling that these issues are ones that he thinks he can get the greatest cooperation from the United Nations on over the coming year of his presidency.
You know, this whole United Nations thing, I mean, you know, there are a lot of conservatives who look at the United Nations and say, yeah, that's a good place to go and chat. But otherwise, they really don't have much use for that thing, you know. I think there are a lot of people who think it might work better as riverfront condominiums. Do you think there's any changing that, or is that just a fact?
Oh, I certainly don't agree with that assessment.
But you agree that that's how a whole lot of people in this country feel about it?
Well, absolutely. I do think that that is how many feel about the United Nations. But the fact of the matter is that the problems that the United States is facing today are increasingly international in nature and thus require transnational solutions.
Okay, transnational solutions, but I mean, to what degree is the United Nations really helping find any of these solutions? I mean, you hear a lot, you just don't really... Well, with some notable exceptions and some food work and some international relief work, you don't really see a lot of action, you know.
Well, I think that the United Nations has been successful in a number of areas. Certainly with North Korea, we had a pretty vigorous sanctions regime on North Korea through the United Nations, and they're beginning to roll back their nuclear program.
Well, there was a lot of pressure that was put on them from right around the corner, the whole North Korea thing. I mean, that seemed like threat of force gets change of actions, or that's how it seemed to be.
Well, you need to have your whole toolbox to deal with these problems.
True.
Obviously, you can look at Iraq as well. President Bush's own UN ambassador to the UN, who was the ambassador to Iraq, has said that the United Nations is going to be essential going forward to try to bring about the political reconciliation that's needed to end the violence in that country. And all you have to do is also compare this Gulf War with the previous Gulf War. In the first one, with the United Nations backing, with international support, it cost the United States next to nothing through international contributions. This war has cost us $500 billion with perhaps another $1 trillion on top of that with no end in sight. So
you think the United Nations might have been able to help fix that, huh?
Well, I think that going forward, the United Nations is an essential part of the process. The United Nations, whether people like it or not, has a certain international legitimacy that no other institution or country has. And so, you know, I think you need to respect that and understand that the rest of the world does look to the United Nations for legitimacy. But I think that the United States should look at the United Nations as an essential part of our national security plan.
We certainly talked a lot of United Nations type issues today. Spencer Boyer, Director of the International Law and Diplomacy at the Center for American Progress. Good to see you, Spencer.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. A growing search now for two